Bases dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down here. It's April 9th. It's a Thursday. It's a Throwback Thursday. So your Throwback Thursday question on the board, and we'll remind you a few times. We'll get into this probably in hour number 2. Your favorite match you've seen in person. Your favorite match that you attended in your soccer history. And, maybe bonus points will be given for... not creativity, but obscurity. We'll see how this goes. I'm sure quite a few will have the 2018 MLS Cup final. That is understandable. But there could be some other very interesting matches that will go onto this list. We've got a lot of things to get into. There's actually been a decent bit of news, or at least innuendo, out of Europe and specifically out of England, as the Premier League tries to figure out what's going on and how they're going to handle this. And, I mean, the New York Times, John, I think, nails this with their headline of the article that came out very early this morning from Rory Smith and Tariq Panja. Premier League clubs and players are at war. Both are losing. Pretty much sums up what we've been saying about this. Yeah,
because, you have... And we'll get into the Matt Slater piece from The Athletic when you're talking about finances for a majority of the teams when it comes to profit and loss. It's not very pretty. And players who are having back and forth with the government about what they should be able to give to help out with the effort to fight pandemic and giving salaries back. It's a mess on a bunch of different fronts.
Yeah, let's start with that part about the players and giving back and all of that. So you saw many different players tweet a statement with the hashtag #PlayersTogether. Came out yesterday and says, over the course of the last week, we, as a group of Premier League players, have held numerous talks together with the vision of creating a contribution fund that can be used to distribute money to where it's needed most in this COVID-19 crisis, helping those fighting for us on the NHS front line as well as other key areas of need. This is a critical time for our country and for our NHS, and we are determined to help in any way that we can. All good. They've partnered with NHS charities together. That's going to help generate and distribute funds quickly. It's the National Umbrella Organization for over 150 registered NHS charities. All good. Took a while to get there, and it started with this idea, and I don't know. I want to see what you think about this, John. Robert Snodgrass tweeted this out. I guess there was a lot of back and forth, not even just from teams and players about taking a pay cut, but also it's turned into a battle publicly, and the government spokespeople have gotten involved to the point that Robert Snodgrass tweeted early this morning at Matt Hancock, who's the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care and MP for West Suffolk. Said, thanks, Matt Hancock. It's great to have your backing. ... In future, do your homework on what we do and who we are as people before coming for us. Over £1 billion in tax and NI payments doesn't even earn respect anymore. It's not about us, it's about the real heroes, the NHS. This approach is not going to win any favors. It's not going to win any goodwill. Everybody pays taxes, right?
Yeah, in theory.
I mean, some people write more off than others, but everybody's paying something. So it's not like the players were giving £1 billion or £1 billion in tax money because they were nice guys. And do we really need to come at people about this right now? Can you guys just get on the same page and figure this out? Because you're all looking like fools at the moment when nobody needs to be sidetracked with people looking like fools.
No, and when you have the health secretary sit there and openly say that players need to, quote, play their part and take a pay cut. You don't want to do this in the court of public opinion,
the
because
health secretary has nothing to do with that.
But what I'm getting to the whole dynamic here.
Yeah, but hold on. This is one thing that it has added to it, and this is where the players have pushed back that I do understand. The players taking a pay cut, that's between the clubs that are losing revenue and their employees, the players.
Agreed.
It has nothing to do with the health secretary. Why is he even chiming in? Why is anybody else chiming in? Like, it's not their business until it's brought public between the clubs and the players, and they start sniping at one another. Yeah. But the health secretary has nothing to do with it. And no, like, that is not true, what the health secretary is saying. They need to play their part. They're people just like anybody else. And many of them have made their own donations and done their own support, and it's not their job to do that.
Nope.
Like, that's why I do get Snodgrass mentioning, like, oh, yeah, we've paid a whole bunch of tax money. I mean, everybody has paid tax money. That's a little disingenuous, but when you have the health secretary chiming in saying players need to take a pay cut for a job that the health secretary has no control over, I mean,
correct.
Come on.
You're poking your nose into something that you shouldn't, and I don't know why, unless Hancock is just instantaneously drawn to the idea of sport and athletes, and hey, it's an easy target to sit there and go, yeah, let me sit there and talk to these guys who are, millionaires and what have you.
It sounds like Hancock was asked a question at a press conference and he answered it. Next time, probably should decline to answer because it has nothing to do with him. Maybe that's the better approach.
Yeah, just it's there are times to say things publicly, and there are times to do things privately, and there's a time to keep your nose out of it. And I would lean toward options 2 and 3 if you were Matt Hancock or anyone similar in a case like this.
Yeah. All of it just goes back to the headline of the New York Times. Premier League clubs and players are at war. Both are losing. Nobody's looking good in any of this.
No.
And it's went beyond like not looking good to where it's getting toxic to the point that when that time comes to get back on the field and to figure things out creatively, are they going to be able to sit in a room and actually discuss a plan because they're lobbing these bombs at one another in the media?
Yeah, and that's the deeper part here is that when you get past this first element and you're trying to figure out how to get back on the pitch and finish something that will give the entire country on multiple levels something to rally around, you've already created all of this back and forth across the very large table. And I just, I keep going back to that headline. No one is winning right now when it comes to this particular battle. And it just comes, to me, it just dials itself back to the notion of there's a time to do things diplomatically. There's a time to say the right things. There's a time to keep your nose out of it. And Matt Hancock did not do that from the absolute start.
Yeah, and maybe he got caught with a bit of a gotcha question, but don't answer it. It has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
And say, well, that's between the clubs and the players, and I'm sure they'll come to a conclusion that will be for the good of the country. Next question.
Okay, here we go. It was at the Thursday daily coronavirus briefing when he was asked about it.
Yeah, just brush that one off, play the intelligent card there, just be like, you know what? I'm sure they're going to figure this out. Everybody's suffering right now. Businesses are suffering. I'm sure they'll figure this out for the good of the country. Next question, please. Yes, you.
Say the right thing in a question.
Stay out
like
of
that.
it.
That's what I'm saying. Say the right thing. Avoid it. Sit there and say something nice. Get out of the question.
Yeah. There's nothing good coming from that one. Now you got players coming at you on Twitter. Oh man!
Here's the full quote from that press conference.
Okay.
When he was asked about it, here's the full quote from the Independent.
What was the question? Do you have the question? Because I want to make sure how it was set up.
It's the Independent does not have the question. Okay. They just have it triggered a response from the government with Mr. Hancock asked about the matter at Thursday's daily coronavirus briefing. He says, I think everybody needs to play their part in this national effort, and that means Premier League footballers too, given the sacrifices people are making, including some of my colleagues in the NHS who've made the ultimate sacrifice and gone into work and caught the disease and have sadly died. I think the first thing Premier League footballers can do is make a contribution, take a pay cut, and play their part, end quote.
Yeah, those are all multiple things all at once. So, yeah, I can understand the players getting a little frustrated with that. But, you know, I always go back to my favorite Jay-Z line, and I think he adapted it from Mark Twain. You know, don't argue with fools. People from a distance can't tell who is who.
Yes.
And that's the problem here, because you see Snodgrass's comment, and you're like, man, what's he all riled up about? That doesn't look good. Then you start to go back, and it's like, oh, well, you know, Hancock wasn't very smart either. He didn't handle it well, so they're both fools. So why are we, like, nobody's looking good. Stop. Just stop being fools, please.
Yes.
And if somebody's a fool to you, just let them be a fool by themselves and actually move on. That's
give them enough rope to hang themselves. That's usually good philosophy.
Just stay out of it and do your thing and do what you do. And there you go. It's a mess because there are financial realities in this that cannot be ignored here. That cannot be left to the side. And I'm sorry, even your Liverpools, your Tottenhams, your clubs that have either made a bunch of money in recent years or have very, very rich ownership, they're going to suffer from this too, because teams are having cash flow problems, flat out. And, this is another thing when you get down to it. Okay, the thing about owners and just putting money in because they can put money in, well, there's that financial fair play thing, right? That makes it a little more complicated unless UEFA is going to do something to say, well, if owners have to, put money into their club, they can do that right now. But then you're going to get some clubs, and we heard it from La Liga's president earlier this week, that are going to fight that because they've been fighting for financial fair play from day one. So what do you do? That's where you're at with this, because there is a cash flow problem. It's not hard to figure out. There's no games. And now you're going to get into TV situations with money not being paid, or people knocking on the door and saying, yeah, that money we paid you, you didn't deliver. Give me that back. Let's get that back right now. I'll take a check. That'll work fine.
Yes.
Or we can go to the ATM. I can drive you to the ATM. Would that work better for you? I mean, that's what it's going to turn into. And that's a reality. The other reality is players are under contract. And I think what's hard is right now, everybody is fighting for an immediate conclusion to understand this. And there's no way to do that because we have no idea when the Premier League could play games again. And that's going to drive, does the TV money go back because the season doesn't get finished, or does it stay and maybe you have to work on some kind of make good because it was delayed? Do the players get their full amount because they play a full season, or do they not play a full season? And then maybe you have a way in your contracts to get money back or not pay money out. There's no way to know without knowing what the plan could be for games to happen. And there's no way to know that because you don't know how this is going to go country to country, place to place, in terms of how it spreads. So you're trying to answer a question that you don't honestly know what the question is yet.
And that's the tough part in all of this. And according to both the Times and the Daily Mail, looks like every Premier League club might be getting a multi-million-pound payment that was to be paid at the end of the season to help in covering costs and getting some of your bills paid.
How's that going to work? If you're going to, what kind of payment is this?
Times claim that a proportion of the cash is advanced, and it's weighted because of position.
Right. That they do the money at the end of the season, but does this lead you, or am I looking for something that might not be there? Does this lead you to think that they might not finish the season?
Don't know.
Or are they going to pay a chunk that would go to everybody and then pay the remainders that would be weighted by placement later?
Sounds like the latter.
Yeah, I would think that'd be reasonable. I mean, I don't know. I don't have it in front of me how much those amounts are, but if you paid everybody the minimum amount, whoever the last place gets, then you can make up adjustments on when the season finishes for people where they finish, and the last place team just already got their money.
Yep. Looks like, according to the Times, that it's going to be in the neighborhood across the board of £125 million to help folks deal with their cash flow problems.
Across the board or per team?
Across the board.
Okay. And so 120 is not quite half of what the Premier League initially said they needed to save when they proposed that players take a 15% salary cut for the rest of the year. They said that they needed to save £280 million to make up for lost revenue. So that would be some, but still, a significant amount for team by team. And it's going to vary team by team about what they need to operate and figure it out.
Yeah, it looks like, according to the Times, of course, our friends the paywall have kind of interrupted most of this, but it looks teams at the top of the ladder would be getting close to £20 million, and then it's weighted as we go down the ladder.
Okay, so that's happening. Why is that happening right now? If you go to The Athletic and you read the article that came out yesterday by Matt Slater, you'll understand why. Because most clubs, with a couple of exceptions, who got an extension, have posted their P&L from 2018-2019. And most clubs, it doesn't look too good.
Nope.
It's not pretty. You've got Tottenham, who did really well. You've got Liverpool, who did well. You've got Manchester United, Newcastle from the previous year. We don't know what they did in the last year. And Wolves, who made over £20 million. Good. Manchester City, 10 to the good. Watford, almost 10 to the good. Burnley, 5 to the good. Okay. That's where the good times end, because it gets really bad after that. Brighton, Leicester, Sheffield United, all around £20 million loss. Arsenal 23.5, West Ham 28, Bournemouth, Southampton, Crystal Palace, all in the 32 to 35 million region. Crystal Palace is from the previous year. Norwich close to 40 million loss, and Norwich is not a club who can sustain 40 million pound losses. Aston Villa 68.9 million pound loss, and this is where it starts to get really bad. Chelsea, who we know they have an owner who can withstand it, but over £100 million loss. And Everton, £107 million loss. What in the world's going on at Everton?
That I have no earthly idea. I don't know, unless it's player transfers that have gone completely and totally out of control. That one for me was the shocker of the board, that Everton was at the bottom, 9 figures to the left of the decimal. I have no idea.
Yeah, that's absolutely bonkers. That doesn't make any sense. The article goes into a lot of detail, and Bournemouth, Everton, and Leicester all spent more than 80% of their turnover on staff. Half the league spent more than 70%, which 70% is kind of the magic number where they'd like teams to be, or even be under that. But you got Everton spending more than 80% of what they made on staff. Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh. That's a little scary.
Well,
I don't know. I just don't know how that's sustainable.
I don't either. And I still look at the Bournemouth example. I mean, Everton with Goodison Park and with the unless that number has to do with the construction of the new stadium, and they're trying to figure out costs one way or the other. Bournemouth, for me, is the one that is the gigantic red flag, because you have the smallest stadium in the Premier League at I want to say just under 11,000 or just under 12,000. And you're in a perfect world, and I mean perfect. Callum Wilson scoring double-digit goals, close to 20. Everybody's healthy. No one's missing any matches. You're not going to do any better than 10th through 15th because traditionally that's where the gaggle is. But if things do not go well, you see the Bournemouth that is there this season. And you have to have people in the seats. You have to make sure that that stadium is full every single time to get people in the door, to have all of this talent that you would in fact sell. And Callum Wilson said, I'm not worth going to a big club because of the season that I had. That's probably a godsend for Bournemouth to keep him around in the short term. But there are a lot of these external factors for a small club like Bournemouth that is a nightmare scenario in this economic environment.
Let's go a little bit deeper on this. So over the last year, this is actually further back. Good grief. The wage turnover ratio has been rising. The Premier League ratio went from 55% in 2016-17 to 59% 12 months later. That's a big jump in 1 year. And that's why you've got, if 70% is kind of the good number here, half of the Premier League is over that. And the scary part, and this is typical with the Championship because you're chasing that money, Aston Villa, Norwich, and Sheffield United. Those are the teams that got promoted. All over 100%. What does that mean? Sheffield United's the prime example. Every pound that came in the door, they spent almost £2 on wages. Is that sustainable? You get a dollar, you're spending two. I mean, come on. And that's what you're looking at with this. So you take it. Bournemouth is a club we've talked about a bunch, and Bournemouth is not looking good to stay up. They're already at 85%.
Mm-hmm.
Every dollar that comes in, 85 cents is gone in wages. Now, you drop down to the Championship, you are buying lottery tickets. Because if you don't go straight back, you're screwed. You don't have the infrastructure. And right now, you're screwed anyway. Because you don't have revenue coming in. So, it's bonkers how these clubs are running as a business. I mean, West Ham's looking for money. Because they don't have any. It's a fact. So this is the other side of this whole conversation about getting back on the field and getting games played. There's a lot of clubs who have to potentially play these games to survive. That's a reality of this. Because they were run, and people who want to criticize, it's a fact. There are clubs that were run very poorly, that what this has done is it has shined that spotlight on it and exposed it. That's true. But do you want Bournemouth, Villa, Norwich, Bournemouth, Sheffield United? I mean, I don't think Everton maybe is in that situation because I agree. I think that sounds like some kind of capital project or whatever. Do you want these clubs to go away? Because that's what is potentially a possibility, a real possibility. This is just the top flight, too. This isn't even getting into the leagues below, which it's probably a lot scarier on the numbers. They describe the Championship's books as a disaster zone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, when you've got a situation of Sheffield United, let's say they didn't get promoted, and they were paying basically $2 for every dollar they brought in. How long does that last? Not very long, does it?
Nope.
So, say they didn't get promoted. Say they didn't get promoted for 2 years straight. You're probably going to see a Sheffield United in that situation end up in League One or League Two and be in a precarious financial situation and be the next Bolton. Because you can't sustain that. teams in the championship that decide to go down this road because they feel like they're close to getting the Premier League payday, it is essentially putting your hopes on a lottery ticket. And that's not how you can guarantee your financial success down the road. It's frightening. And if England is like this, and we know Germany, who most people have looked at as a country with the football finances on a good footing, and we know what their potential is if TV payments aren't paid out, and does that have a possible element to why they're training and why they're planning on starting playing the first week of May? I don't think you can discount it, because if you've got almost half of the pro teams in the top two divisions at risk of going into insolvency, well, you're probably going to find a way to get back on the field, aren't you? I mean, that is a reality in part of this. And it's not a fun reality. It's not a pleasant reality, but it's the truth. And if England is like this, if Germany is like they are, what is Spain looking like? What is Italy looking like? I mean, Spain, you've had first division teams that have, played in disaster zones of stadiums. Like, you've got all kinds of madness in both of those countries. What about the after the top two or three teams in France? What does it look like in France? What does it look like in smaller countries? Like, this is part of the conversation. And this is why I think we've seen the conversation change over the last couple of weeks from we want to get back on the field when it's safe, we want to get back on the field in a normal way and play games in front of our fans, to we want to get back on the field and we will go into lockdown mode in one city and play games over 72-hour stretches to get games in because we want to play now. Well, these financial realities, that's why that attitude has changed.
Give you a couple of teams here. Stoke, Huddersfield, Middlesbrough, Wigan, Hull. All of them have spent time recently in the Premier League, last 5 years or so. I think it's safe to say that they were all in the Premier League at one point or another.
Yep.
Where are they right now? No more than 3 points from safety in the Sky Bet Championship. Stoke and Huddersfield, 3 points above safety. Middlesbrough, Wigan, Hull, 2 points from safety. And that's just the championship.
Mm-hmm. You want to know why behind closed doors has become a reality here for the European leagues? Bournemouth's turnover. How much money comes in the door? 88% of it is TV revenue. 88%. If they don't finish the season and money has to go back, there's not much other money to work with. Period. That's Bournemouth.
We mentioned Burnley last week.
Burnley's 83. I mean, Everton, Newcastle, clubs that you would not expect to be in this conversation, 71%. It's wild. I mean, it's just absolutely wild. And when you go down to see a team, and this is the 2017-18 accounts being used for this, but the percentages are probably pretty similar. You can see the difference between a championship team and a Premier League team. So Bournemouth, 88%. Norwich, 28%. Because there wasn't much TV money coming in the championship. You had to go make your money elsewhere. Villa and Sheffield were at 40 and 41%. Can a Bournemouth go from 88% of your revenues coming in being TV money to the different amount of TV money you're getting in the championship and find a way to make that work? I don't know how. Yep. I really don't. I think it's parachute payments coming in for the... Is it 2 years? But the first year is the large amount. The second year is not. 3 years now.
3 years, and it is that cascading idea.
Well, that's why they stretched it to 3. I think initially it was 1 year. So now it's 3 to try to balance that. But if you're Bournemouth and you go down, your reality is you got really 2 years to go. Because I think that third amount is not.
It's like
$1
million. It's like $1 million down.
It's insignificant. The first year, honestly, is where you got to go back up, because you're still probably somewhat structured on the field as a Premier League club. You probably got guys under contract that are on Premier League kind of contracts that you might not be able to move. You've got to go straight back, because if you don't, you might not ever go back.
See Sunderland.
Yeah. I mean, and Sunderland's a much bigger club than Bournemouth. Like, that's the thing is, a Villa, for example. I mean, Villa is a bigger club. Can they handle this easily? No. But are they in a better position than a Bournemouth? Yeah. Bigger clubs can go down, and if they don't go back straight away, they can find a way back over time. Bournemouth, I mean, it could be catastrophic. Burnley, it could be catastrophic. Because now it's not just going down and the pain of that. It's the pain of losing the money right now. And as the league has said, there's £762 million at play that broadcast partners could ask back if the remaining games are not played. You've got clubs that probably can't afford to give that back.
Yep.
Flat out. So, I don't know. That's why the Premier League is trying to figure it out. It's why the Football League is part of the conversation as well. And Dan Rohn had a tweet this morning. He's the sports editor at the BBC News. It is the letter from the league sent to all the clubs from Chairman Rick Perry. No training with players until May 16th at the earliest. They estimate that they'll need approximately 56 days to complete the season. Still remain hopeful of concluding the season in the summer months, and the assumption is that the matches will be behind closed doors. And that's not where the Football League would want to be, because the lower down the pyramid you go, the less likely it is that your TV money is significant. I mean, there's probably some coming in the door, but not a much. You want those fans in the stands. Probably not going to be able to do that. Gwen's
Gwen
fired
agrees.
up this morning. Yeah. She's really riled up. She likes that. She likes lower division English football. She's a big fan.
Except when they go to nuclear options.
Yeah, no, she gets mad about that. She bit me when that came up. It's a mess, and it's a mess everywhere because soccer has not exactly been run like a typical business for quite a while, and it's showing with this spotlight on it.
To give you an idea about just the championship, and this goes back to 2018, you're looking at in the neighborhood of £100 million a year for your TV contract from Sky. That's for the championship only. So you're looking at £100 million a year for the championship as opposed
Divided
to
by 24.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Mm-hmm. So 4.5.
4.5 versus what, 190?
Yeah. So
something
4,
like
north of 4, not quite 5. So the number that they were looking at was like 5 and change. So yeah, so let's just say 5 million per club in the old contract from the last numbers. So yeah, 5 versus 400 million.
Good grief. Man.
And it was a record deal when that was signed at 5 years and 600 back in 2018.
Yeah. That's the reality. I mean, that's not posturing, that's not bluster, that's real. This stuff is real, and it does affect the decision making. It's not the situation in MLS, but over time, it will be the situation for every league. It will. I mean, you've seen MLS teams, Real Salt Lake, DC United. It looks like they're going to have to furlough some staff. I mean, this is a reality. because there's no money coming in the door. And MLS doesn't have to deal with financial fair play, so owners can do different things, but you're asking people to pay money when they're not making any money. And that's not something that, honestly, like, I don't tell people how to spend their money. You have to secure the long-term future of the business, because the club, in all of these situations, any country you're talking about, the club is the most important thing. And the club has to survive this time, and the club has to come back. And in some countries, that club is going to come back in a smaller, different, reorganized way. Okay. If that's how the club survives, that's how the club survives, because you're talking about, and Gwen's very strong on this, you're talking about community institutions. That's why in Argentina, they basically would not let clubs go out of business. They just would not let it happen. They're like, oh, you owe $40 million, you owe $50 million. Nah, we'll turn our head for right now, and you can pay us whenever you can pay us. They don't allow that to happen. I don't know if other countries are going to be in that situation. That's what's hard about this.
Yeah, and the letter from Perry also mentioned that the £125 million payment from the Premier League is not going to be split by the EFL clubs. Currently, the letter says, quote, the EFL board has taken the decision to put on hold the forwarding of advanced monies while additional clarity is sought on other financial matters, particularly in respect to player wages.
Okay. It's an absolute mess all the way across the board, because there is not an answer in how to definitively solve this. There's not. That's the hardest thing about this, and that's the thing that really everybody involved in it needs to get on the same page as best as they can, because nobody has the answer and is hiding it. Nobody has the answer and is keeping it from you. You don't know when you're going to be able to play. You don't know when it's going to be safe to play. You don't know how long that's going to be. Nobody knows. It's just a fact. Nobody knows. The scientists don't know for sure, because we've never seen this. The team owners don't know. The TV people don't know. The players don't know. There's no way to know. So you try to make plans. You try to move forward as much as you can, but everything is on hold in this game. Now, I think that it is pretty much a foregone conclusion at this point that we will see soccer come back behind closed doors everywhere. I think that's how it's going to go, because I think the need for the games to come back for a variety of reasons, whether it's financial, whether it's just morale for the countries, the general population, what have you, you're going to see games come back before you can have big crowds. So you're going to see games behind closed doors. I do think that is what we're looking at this point, across the board. And when that is, I don't know. And every country is going to have a different answer to it, too. And that's what's so hard for a UEFA side of this is, England might not start until after Germany is towards the end of their season. And I don't have the Champions League and Europa League matchups in front of me, but you could have a very difficult spot for UEFA, because you could have teams, if they just say, you know what, we're going to hold those competitions until everybody's done, we'll have the competitions, then we'll have the off season. I mean, teams might finish and then be sitting for another month before they get back to competition, because some leagues might not be able to start until later. That's what's so hard about it from a big picture perspective. Individual leagues, it's hard enough. You start talking about continental competition, wow. I think in CONCACAF it'll be much easier to deal with, because you're talking about 4 countries, 3 leagues that are involved, and the timeline is going to be different region to region, but it's not going to be as dramatically different as it could be country to country in Europe. So, and you don't have to finish it by, before the next season starts. Like you could have a CONCACAF Champions League final at the end of the year if you needed to. You know what I mean? Like you've got plenty of room to do things with.
Yeah, and obviously we keep talking about Open Cup. Wouldn't count on it from an MLS perspective.
No, I just don't think that's going to fit. I don't think it's going to count for anybody. I don't think any pro teams will be able to be involved. And U.S. Soccer, the USASA, the U.S. Adult Soccer Association, who oversees the amateur side, they have canceled all of their amateur competitions for 2020. The Open Cup is still on the side right now, and does that turn into a de facto amateur competition for 2020? It might, if there's a way to even do that. But I don't see the professional teams participating. I just don't think you're going to be able to fit it into the calendar.
Yep, Leagues Cup, I don't see that being a part of any kind of a discussion either.
That can be pushed to next year. That's fine.
Yeah, so, right now, at least here in the Americas, focus is on MLS schedule, CONCACAF in whatever iteration they end up being in.
Yep. All of it is difficult. Copa Libertadores is pretty well structured out, and in South America, they're getting this a little bit later than everybody, and they're also going to be going into their winter, and there's a concern that maybe there's more of a spread in colder weather. I don't think we really truly know at this point yet because we're all figuring it out. But, South America, Copa Libertadores, the South American leagues, it's very unknown at the moment. It does look like that because they got it kind of later than everybody, they were able to lock things down earlier in the process than other countries did. And that could help them deal with it better. So maybe they don't have as long of a issue because they were further ahead of it because they had more information.
So, yeah, it's honestly be flexible as someone who enjoys the sport, as we know everyone who listens to the show is. Just understand that there's a lot in the unknown. And just be patient about it and understand that whatever a plan is today could be a different plan tomorrow. It's entirely different.
It's going to be hard for the leagues to figure this pay cut deferral thing out. It's really going to be team by team. That's where you're going to be able to have more of an impact with it. Southampton made an announcement 5 hours ago that, let's see, the board of directors, the first team manager, his coaching staff, and the first team squad have agreed to defer part of their salaries for the months of April, May, and June to help protect the future of the club, the staff that work within it, and the community we serve. The club also said they will not use the government's job retention scheme. Scheme has a negative connotation in the United States. It's used as like a plan in the UK, so you hear that, you're like, oh, well, what? But no, it's a plan. Southampton will not use that in April, May, and June. The all staff not deferring part of their salaries will continue to receive 100% of their pay, paid in the normal way until June 30th. Any decision on the future beyond this date will be made in advance of this, but only when more information is known. So Southampton all came together. That's the decision they've made. Okay. Real Madrid. Marca has an article about 5 days of negotiations that led to Real Madrid's pay cuts. And this was, something that we kind of wondered because Real Madrid in a great financial situation. They were not one that was looking like trouble. Barcelona has some trouble. Barcelona has a lot of trouble because some of their contracts are insane. Real Madrid, they're fine. But 5 days of negotiations led to their players agreeing to a 10% reduction to their annual salaries, which could rise to 20% if the season isn't completed. Sergio Ramos, who's been the captain for quite a while, he's the leader of the locker room, he kind of started everything and did the negotiation on the players' behalf, and that's where they came down to it. So after all of the talk, Real Madrid, they all made the decision that the club needed to save 100 million euro in the event that the season is being canceled, 50 million euro in the event of the season getting back underway. They've lost that. They need to try to save that. So that's what started the whole conversation. A lot of back and forth about what the percentages would look like. They ended up settling on 10, and it goes up to 20 if they don't finish the season. So if Real Madrid is in that situation, you can bet that every club in Europe is facing that kind of situation. I mean, that's the facts. If Real Madrid's feeling like they need to save £100 million if they don't finish it, 50 million if they do finish it, any other club, especially like an Everton, who is in the kind of situation they're in financially, poof, Real Madrid's worried about losing money. All right? Them's the facts.
Mm-hmm. Also getting into the discussion of furloughing in Britain, the culture secretary, we mentioned Secretary Hancock.
Mm-hmm.
The culture secretary has gotten into the discussion about furloughing, and he says furloughing wasn't designed for billionaire owners, and he's warning Premier League sides that the scheme should be a last resort, and the public will take a dim view of clubs like Tottenham taking advantage of furloughing.
That is true. That is absolutely true. It was, and I don't know the program 100%, but I'm assuming the program did not make separations between owners of businesses. Because if Tottenham can take advantage of it, then obviously it's not. So,
yeah.
Was it designed for rich owners of businesses to take advantage of? No, probably not. But are they going to? Duh. Yes, they are.
Uh-huh.
Where Tottenham takes the big hit is, yes, the ownership, but also the fact in that Athletic article, they were the ones who made the most money last year in their books. So it's a little bit of both sides of it. We go back to Real Madrid, who's worried about losing money and figuring out how to make cuts and work with their players to do that, to save money. If they're in that situation, Tottenham would be in that situation too, because Tottenham is not making more money and is worth more than Real Madrid. That's a fact. But does it look bad? 100%. And that's the problem with doing it. And that's why Southampton probably came out and made that a focal point of their statement to say that they weren't, because that looks good. That's the hard part of this. You have the financial realities of every club in the world losing money right now, at risk of losing a whole lot more money if they don't finish the seasons. Period. That's real. You have the PR side of it, where everybody is struggling, and people don't want to hear about Tottenham taking advantage of that government scheme to pay their employees. They feel like Tottenham should be able to just pay them no matter what. And, as we've said, maybe they can right now. What if they don't finish the season? Which is an absolute possibility. I mean, I don't think you can say that's just never going to happen at this point. Yeah. What if they can't finish the season? What if TV partners come back and say, yeah, that £762 million that we paid you for a full season, we didn't get all those games, so let's go to the ATM.
Mm-hmm.
I have a bat
Yes.
in the back seat. You're going to pay us back. These are real things. And yes, even Tottenham probably is worried about their bottom line because they're taking this kind of approach. Real Madrid, worried about the bottom line. The clubs that are doing that are probably the ones that are going to be in a better position to handle this, and clubs that are not taking care of their business. And as was said in the Athletic article, it's a great quote. The what was it? Something like this. You see who made the repairs to their roof before it rained. So the clubs that have not taken care of their business ahead of this, government scheme is not going to help them at this point.
No,
they're in a much deeper boat. But the teams that have run their business very well, yeah, they're going to take every opportunity to continue to do that and ensure the sustainability of their club for years and years to come.
Culture Secretary Oliver Dowden said, so football clubs should only be using it as a last resort. I think the fans and the public at large are going to take a pretty dim view if they're not using it except in the last resort. I've made that pretty clear. This scheme wasn't designed for the people who have millionaire players and billionaire owners. People should take responsibility. Clubs should take responsibility. I don't want to get into a position as Culture Secretary of picking out individual clubs. I've been very clear about what I expect and what I believe fans and the public at large expect.
That's still very vague. You know, if let's take both sides of that percentage turnover chart. Okay, Tottenham, it's not acceptable for them to do it. Everton lost over £100 million last year. Should they do it? Could they do it? Would they be allowed to do it? I don't know.
I'm sure under current guidelines they'd be allowed to.
I know they could and they'd be allowed. But if the culture secretary is saying he doesn't want to be in the position of picking clubs, that's basically saying that he might put himself in the position of picking clubs.
Yes.
And then it's, well, you know,
what's your guidelines?
Yeah, I mean, you know, who's your owner? Do you have enough money? Did you lose enough money? Do you qualify? Like, come on. I mean, that's where you're getting to a point that you're picking which clubs are allowed to do this to help ensure their survival. Because that's what ultimately all this comes down to, even for a Tottenham and a Real Madrid.
Well, and Dowden addressed lower levels too. He said there are lots of clubs at the lower levels who are really struggling at the moment, and it's right that they should be able to take advantage of furloughing because we want those clubs to be able to survive through this difficult period so that once we're out of it, live sport will be able to resume. Responsibility does need to be taken by the small number of clubs that it may not be appropriate for them to use this scheme.
That's fine. Now that's fine. And more than anything, I agree with the PR hit. And that's what a club who's going to think about doing this has to think about. You know, you're going to get hammered in the media. You're going to get hammered in the court of public opinion if you do this, if you are a large club. That's a fact. Should you? That's a different conversation.
Yes.
Are you? Yes, you are. No matter what. But should they? And let's go to that middle tier, the clubs that say, well, you know, we don't need to do it yet. Let's take Southampton, for example. They have made moves, and they've worked with their staff, and they've worked with their players to not have to do that for 3 months. What happens if you don't finish the season and you get to the end of June? You know, is it acceptable for them to do it at that point? Probably, because they did make moves to avoid using it initially. So if they had to use it later, okay. I think it's probably going to be, you know, looked upon a little better. But if a big club waits to try to use it and then has to use it late in the game, is that any better? I mean, that's what's so hard about all of it is you're making judgment decisions on businesses. And I think this is what we do with sports in general, you know, like it's a business. But we don't think of it as a business like a store. You don't have a warm, like, personality feeling about a store. You do about your team. And you think of it as a person. So when they do something that disappoints you, well, then this is how people act. There's no right answers here. That's what's so difficult about all of it. Is there's just no right answers any which way to say, this is what everybody does, do it, we're all good, everything's fine. No. It's just not the case.
So, you know, it's because I think that folks view and this is across the board, any sport, any fan that you are of any club, doesn't matter what sport we're talking about, it's a living, breathing thing. It's an organism that elicits emotions and feelings and has its own sense of being, I guess is probably the best way to put it. So that's why there's that sense of energy that's attached to it, because it's treated not just as something that is a piece of paper that you see in the stats page or in the standings page of the sports section. It's a living, breathing thing that exudes emotions.
Yeah. I don't know. And I don't know where this is going to go next. I think all eyes are on Germany.
Yeah.
And if they're going to be able to get games started in early May and how they do it, what that could mean for others. Germany's handled the spread of the virus as good as anybody. So they're looking, it sounds like, at potentially relaxing some of the just protocols in the country as a whole after this weekend, I think, is what they're exploring, and easing back into it. So a lot of people will be paying attention to how Germany makes their next steps. I think a lot of people are paying attention to what China and Japan and Korea do with their sports leagues as well, because you can start to follow timelines and think that maybe if it takes them 3 months, then maybe it can take leagues in the United States 3 months and other countries 3 months. But everyone has its own different challenges with it. So we will keep you up to date as news continues to break in this regard, and it's getting to a stage where you're getting the kind of conversations we've had this morning. You're getting clubs and rumors about players and player movement in the next transfer window. It's all over the map in terms of the worldwide soccer conversation right now. We're getting reports about Ronaldinho finally getting out of jail in Paraguay. He's been in jail since he faked a passport when he didn't even need a passport.
And isn't he staying in like some 4-star or 5-star hotel in the
Well,
inland?
I think he's on house arrest or whatever.
Okay.
But he's out of jail. So he didn't need a passport to go to Brazil or go from Brazil to Paraguay. But he didn't have a passport because it had been confiscated by the Brazilian government. But he could have used, I think, whatever the equivalent of our driver's license would have been. But I guess he didn't know that, or he wasn't told that, and he faked a passport and got busted, and he's been in jail for a while. And he's out of jail, and there's rumors out there that, and this came out of Argentina, that the money that was paid for his bail to get him out of the jail, and I guess into the hotel where he's on house arrest, came from an account in Barcelona. And people have speculated that it was Lionel Messi who bailed Ronaldinho out of jail. They've been very close. Messi, when he was breaking into the team, Ronaldinho looked at him like a little brother. And they were very, very close, to the point that Guardiola was worried that Messi was kind of falling into Ronaldinho's bad habits towards the end of his time at Barcelona, where Ronaldinho was spending more time out in the nightclubs than training. And that was one of the main reasons that Guardiola, one of his first decisions was to move Ronaldinho on. And he made sure that he talked to Messi about that, I think, before he talked to Ronaldinho, because he knew that the future was Messi and all that. But they've remained very, very close. So is it possible? Yeah, I guess. I don't know. But that's another crazy thing going on in the soccer world right now, is Ronaldinho is at least out of jail now.
Placed in police custody at a 4-star hotel in the Paraguayan capital of Asunción. A date for a new trial has not yet been set because of delays caused by the coronavirus pandemic. Once the news reached the inmates at the detention unit in Asunción, sources have explained how they hastily arranged a goodbye barbecue for Ronaldinho and his brother.
Oh, yeah. No, they were playing five-a-side, and they were playing foot volley, and All kinds of stuff. I mean, they had a good time in this jail in Paraguay, but it's still a jail.
Yes.
I mean, yes, they were able to play sports and stuff, but they're still in jail. So, it's not the best place to be in Paraguay, I guess. So, anyway, Ronaldinho's not there anymore. Good for him. We'll see what happens next. You're starting to get the rumors about what this next transfer window could look like and what managers and stuff could look like. And our friend Nick Alifi will, I don't think, be happy about this, but DiMarzio in Italy is reporting that Pioli has very little chance of staying at Milan next season as the manager. We've talked about this on Soccer Over There. The club has held further contacts with Ralf Rangnick, with the transfer budget being the main obstacle as the German coach wants full control over it. Unai Emery is an alternative.
Okay.
Go ahead and give me your negative response to that, because that sounded like you just crapped all over Rangnick and Emery.
No, I just crapped all over Emery. I didn't crap over Rangnick at all.
Why are you crapping all over Unai Emery?
Because he turned out to be pretty much a false flag from his successes in Ligue 1, which to me is a relative term anyway, to Arsenal. And I didn't necessarily think that Emery to Arsenal was a good hire anyway. I didn't think that he was ready for the Premier League. And it took, 2 seasons for Arsenal to turn and go in a different direction?
So the Premier League's so much better than Spain and France?
After the first 3 clubs, say, in Ligue 1, I would say yes.
Is it so much better than Valencia and Sevilla?
Valencia and Sevilla, for me, they've done great things in Europa League, and they've been the perpetual pains in the butt. But I just don't know when the translation or the transition from Ligue 1 to the Premier League, I don't know what happened. It's just that, all right, you're going to have to show me when it comes to Emery.
Is Arsenal a club that is as successful in recent years as Valencia or Sevilla?
Ooh, that's a relative question, but I would say
or PSG?
Well, yeah, PSG. Well, PSG when it comes to Champions League and Ligue 1, it's like, okay, tell me who's going to compete against PSG in Ligue 1 for a title. You're going to outspend everybody. You're going to get all the talent in the world. You better win Ligue 1 if you're at PSG.
And he did.
And then you're just, Arsenal for me comes down to the level of investment that seems to be somewhat hot and cold by the front office and by Stan Kroenke as to what he wants to do. And it's just it seemed like the players that Emery brought in at his time in Arsenal either didn't fit or weren't working philosophically with what Emery wanted to do, and it just seemed like it was square peg round hole a lot of the time.
Well, let's come back to the meat of this. At Sevilla, Emery won 3 Europa Leagues, 3 straight. Arsenal, he was a runner-up in the Europa League. At Arsenal, do they have a better roster than Liverpool?
No.
Manchester City?
No.
Okay, so best is third.
Best.
Chelsea?
Not really, no.
I would kind of agree with you. Tottenham?
Nope. When healthy at 100%.
Yeah. Last year especially. That's what you're comparing more of this to last season. Leicester?
Depends on Top's investment, the players you bring in, and how they integrate with Brendan Rodgers.
No, just comparing the rosters as they stood going into this season.
Stood going into this season?
Mm-hmm.
I got to go with Leicester. I really do.
Yeah, it's not. If you could argue it, I don't think it's clear cut. Maybe either way, but Leicester's been more successful. Is that because of Rodgers versus Emery or not? I don't know, but it's not like Arsenal has this amazing roster that should put them in a top 4 position. Let's get real about it. That's where Arsenal is these days. And when you make these kinds of moves and you keep going, space to space and moving managers now, and okay, how long are you going to give Arteta? We'll see. I don't know. Like, to say that Emery's not ready and he couldn't go to Milan and be successful, I disagree with you completely, because I think with clubs that have had talent, and his Sevilla teams you could potentially say are more talented than his Arsenal teams.
Yeah.
His PSG team was, for sure.
Yeah.
He's succeeded. I mean, he's won. He hasn't been a bad manager. Arsenal,
but if at PSG you can't win with what the sheiks give you.
But he did. But that's the thing. You can't play that card, because he did win. So it's not like, if you can't win with that, then you're terrible. He did win. I mean, what else can he do? He did what he was supposed to do.
I don't give him a whole lot of cookies for that, though.
Well, then what is he supposed to do in that case? So then he's
I give him more credit. I give him more credit for what he did at Sevilla and Valencia than what he was.
His job at PSG was to win, and he won. He did not win the Champions League, but
they never do.
A lot of people haven't won the Champions League there. So I mean, I don't know if you're going to knock him for that. So basically, what you're saying, your argument is that if you go to PSG, you cannot succeed as a manager. No, it doesn't matter what you do.
What I'm saying, well, it depends on what you're looking at when you say succeed. Because if at PSG, the biggest thing at PSG is with the players that the sheiks give you, basically let them play, come up with a formation or a system, and stay the hell out of the way.
And he did. He won. I mean, there's nothing to complain about outside of not winning the Champions League. And I will make the argument that PSG will always have a problem in that situation, at least in the previous environment. Maybe it'll look different down the road. But they were never tested in France enough to be battle-tested for Champions League matches.
Completely agree.
So I can't hold anything about Emery's time at PSG against him. He did what he was supposed to do. He won the league. He won 2 cups. He won 2 league cups. I mean, he won pretty much everything that was in front of him. So there's nothing more he could have done. And he went to Arsenal, and I think the idea was that he would go to Arsenal and elevate them above where they are. But the fact is, they are where they are.
Yep.
They're not a better team, a better roster than 4, 5, maybe 6, maybe 7.
Mm-hmm. Nowadays, yeah.
And the idea was that he would elevate them above that, but you're doing the opposite. It's the thing of, well, at PSG, he's just expected to win, so if he wins, you don't get any credit for it. At Arsenal, you're expecting him to be a miracle worker and punch above his weight, and if he doesn't, then he failed. And that's not necessarily true either. It didn't work because it started to fall apart by the end, so it was time to go. I'm not against that, but if Milan came in to get him, I think Milan would be far better off getting Unai Emery than Ralf Rangnick, because then you're changing your personality as a club. Because Rangnick is going to come in and play, first off, in a very German kind of way. You're going to change the way that the club plays, and you're not talking about just any club here. You're talking about a club with a heritage and a history of a style. And it is not the style that Ralf Rangnick is known for. I don't think that works at all. I don't think that would be successful. Unai Emery would be a manager who would come in, who's been at big clubs, who would understand, the mentality of being at a Milan, and would be a better hire. Absolutely be a better hire. Because if you're going to go down the road with Ralf Rangnick, first off, it's going to take you a full season to adapt and get the players needed to play that style.
Yep.
And then you're going to have to, alongside of that, sell your fan base, which is, not a quiet fan base by any stretch. You're going to have to sell them on that style. And you're not going to be successful straight away. You can't be. That roster's not built to play that way. You bring in Unai Emery, he's going to be able to adapt straight away. And I think in that league, he would be able to take a team that maybe talent-wise is in the top 6 to 8 and have them a little bit higher up the table because it's not as big of a gap. Arsenal, if Unai Emery was a miracle worker, Arsenal was not going to finish in the top 2 in the Premier League.
Nope.
Wasn't happening.
Nope.
In Italy, can he, with some strategic investment, and also maybe not asking to control the entire transfer budget like it sounds like Rangnick is, could he go in and get them to a level of Inter and Juventus? Juventus is going to be tough, and we're seeing that how Inter has struggled to maintain that spot, but Inter has shown that it can be done. And right now, it feels like the time that you could go and be bold and compete. So I think that's a better approach. I think that's a much, much better approach than going and changing your style. I disagree with your shade at Unai Emery.
If I get Valencia Sevilla Emery, then I'm all for it.
Let me make this point clear.
Sure.
Because you're saying PSG Emery and Arsenal Emery was bad. I'm saying it was what those clubs were. PSG won the French League, won the Cups, didn't win the Champions League. That's who they are.
Yeah,
Arsenal
agreed.
Won, during his time there, he won 43 matches of 78. He lost 19. He drew 16. Win percentage was 55.1%. That's who Arsenal is right now. He didn't fail. He didn't elevate them to another level.
Yeah, he didn't fail, but he didn't succeed is, I guess, the easiest way to put.
But what was success?
And that's the thing, is that you're in the Premier League. If you're Arsenal, whoever is the manager, but we'll take the Emery example here since we're on Unai Emery. He didn't fail, which means he was still part of the top 6, top 7 discussion, but he didn't move them up the ladder closer to the top, even though we both know that that's an unattainable thing to be number 1 or number 2. To move them back up into the 3-4 discussion, for me, would be success when you're talking about Arsenal. Unai Emery,
they're not good enough.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I don't think he was given a budget, or the players that he brought in. It's a combination of factors. The budget that he was given for transfers, I think at the time, was not one where you could make the quote-unquote big splash. But with the players that he brought in, he did not improve their standing closer to the 3-4. That's what I'm talking about when it comes to Unai Emery and Arsenal. At PSG, it's basically you succeeded, but success is relative. Whereas I look at Valencia and Sevilla, and that to me is success because of what he did in La Liga and what he did in the European theater. That's so for me, it's a different aspect of not failing, not succeeding, levels of success versus true success, which is what I saw with him at Valencia and Sevilla. That's what I'm looking at when it comes to his levels of success. I think that if he is that guy and they bring him in, then yes, you're going to have someone who can adapt to the players who are currently there. Then that transition time and that transfer window in that first offseason, whenever that is, bring in guys that he wants to bring in. And then you have that runway to work your way further up the ladder. I look at his levels of success, and it's relative, and it's obviously not what folks were looking for, although I look at what he did at Valencia and Sevilla as success, in quotation marks, versus the other two stops.
But I think your measure of success at PSG and at Arsenal is an unfair measure for any manager, let alone Unai Emery, because PSG is always going to be at a disadvantage in winning the Champions League because they don't see the same competition as other leagues. And Arsenal did not have the investment or the players to finish much higher than they did. Was it time to move on at Arsenal? Yeah, I'm not saying they should have kept him because he was, doing this amazing job, but to say he failed, I think is unfair. And to say that because of those two stops that he couldn't be successful at Milan, I don't think it makes sense. Because you're talking a little different situation.
I think he's got a bigger runway at Milan if he's there than he had in the other places.
Well, I think they're closer. I mean, PSG. Let's get real here. In PSG, the only thing you can do to be a successful manager at PSG, I mean, to be more successful than previous managers, that's what we're talking about, would be to win the Champions League. And that's not impossible, but it's almost like you have to have the perfect season to do it, because you don't see the same competition week in and week out as other teams do. Arsenal, to be more successful than other managers would be in that role, you've got to get them into the top 4.
Yep.
And you've got to make a Champions League run. That's the expectation. And is that a realistic one? No, it's not. It's not realistic at Arsenal to think that way right now. So he didn't have that success, but you're measuring him against an unrealistic expectation. Milan, you're talking about a club that right now on paper, are they at the same level as Juve and Inter? I don't think so. But how much further off are they? Not as big of a gap as it is between Arsenal and Liverpool and Manchester City.
Right.
I don't think it's that big of a gap. And I think we've seen him have success at clubs that are roughly the same kind of size right now in comparison. And he can take that to Milan. And he didn't fail. Like, he didn't go to Arsenal or PSG and not do what their realistic expectation was. He hit that bar. He didn't go beyond it, and he was hired to go beyond it in those roles. Was it realistic to go beyond it? I don't think it was. I don't think either club is built to do what their unrealistic expectation was. I think he can have success at Milan, and I think he's a better hire than changing your style and bringing in a style of play that, frankly, isn't Italian at all, and isn't what Milan has been known for. So we'll see. That's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on as we get past this stuff and we start having these conversations, because these conversations are going to be very different. You're going to have some clubs that might not have the money to go out and spend or hire or buy players that they might have done if this hadn't happened. Gustavo, our friend in Buenos Aires, chimes in, and he's got a great point. Gustavo says, those who were never big spenders and have some financial education unconsciously prepare for these challenges, but nothing prepares you to face this. In South America, we will have more information, but very limited resources. Argentine clubs are already practically bankrupt, and that's a fact, and that's why we've talked about it. And there was I think an article from an interview that came out from Ezequiel Barco talking about, did he leave Independiente a little too early? Well, the reason he left Independiente is they needed the money. They needed the transfer money, flat out. Pity Martinez and River, they needed the transfer money. That's what Argentine clubs do. You can't hold on to guys very long that are at that kind of level. They're either going to go to a Boca or a River in terms of the league, maybe to a Brazilian club, or they're going to leave the country, leave the continent, because those clubs have to bring in that transfer money. And that's the scary part for the Argentine clubs and a lot of South American clubs, who their model is to develop talent, bring it into the first division at a young age, have them play games at, like Barco did, at 17, 18, play big games, and then move them on very young to bring in that money. Well, now, if you have clubs in Europe who aren't able to spend on potential like they did before, that's going to be a problem. That's also because you're talking about a market that is, I think, a good one to be in.
Yep.
And also a lower price point to get into that market. This is also a huge opportunity for MLS clubs. And I think Liga MX clubs as well, depending on the hit of the coronavirus in Mexico and how it affects their league and their business. Because these Argentine, these Uruguayan, these Paraguayan clubs need to sell players on a good day to balance the books. They're going to need to do that even more because it's a fact. Most of them are pretty much bankrupt as it is. And it's just they're allowed to operate because they're community institutions and they're not allowed to fail. but they got to bring in money just to pay people. So how do you do that in a big chunk? You sell a player. There's a lot of talented players. They're going to need to be sold, and they're probably going to need to be sold quickly. That's where this could get really interesting in this hemisphere. And as we've said, for 3 years now, MLS's first step to become one of the biggest leagues in the world would be to be the biggest league in this hemisphere. Brazil and Mexico and Argentina are the clubs that are, or the leagues that are kind of in the way of that right now as a league-wide situation. I think Colombia could potentially be in that conversation as well. This, and the way clubs handle it and the way leagues handle it, this could accelerate that growth for an MLS if they are intelligent coming out of it. It's not just, we can just buy whatever, we can just do whatever. You still have to be smart, but you can go maybe faster than you did before. Maybe more of that young teenage talent from South America, instead of going to a Sporting Lisbon, instead of going to a smaller Spanish club, a smaller Italian club, maybe they come to MLS first. That's where it could get really interesting.
And we've also talked about over time the single entity structure of MLS being part of the equation to help the individual franchises succeed, because everyone is working the same level and desires for success. And I think that where you're not going to have one team completely fall off and be like the Premier League discussion that we had in hour number one, the fact that you have the structure that MLS does, I think it strengthens it in the world market with what we're seeing and when we come out the other side.
Yeah, and that's what's one of the interesting developments of it, because I was just talking in this hemisphere, but when you do start to look at the European leagues and where MLS can get to very quick, I've said that France was the one that you're trying to target to get to that level outside of maybe the PSG side of it. I didn't think that was all that far off to begin with, and I think that gap is going to close quickly. It's going to look very different, and Gustavo makes a really good point with what he said. Clubs that have been, and leagues that have been financially smart and weren't the big spenders before are probably going to be in a better position to weather this. How do they handle their spending and their planning on the other side of this? Because the positions could be different for them. Instead of being the fiscally responsible, maybe less resourced club that they were before, they might be in a higher standing coming out of it. Does that change how they act? Do they blow that standing by making bad decisions? That's what leagues and teams are going to have to be careful of.
And going back to the discussion that we had quickly about Emery, Nick Alifi, he's chimed in. He says, it'll be Emery. Ralph's need to handle transfers will not be allowed by Elliott. So unless Ralph buckles, it ain't happening.
Yeah, I think that's a big issue, obviously, but I think the bigger issue would be the style. And that's why I was surprised that his name came up with Milan anyway, because style and history and tradition are big things with big Italian clubs, and I just don't see that working out at all. I think it would be a colossal failure. The hashtag today is Throwback Thursday, and we'll get into your favorite matches that you saw in person here in just a second, but I'm going to put you on the spot, John. Why don't you tell us about our friends at Apolinsky & Associates?
AA-legal.com. Steve Apolinsky, who has been a tremendous supporter of everything that we've been doing here at Soccer Down here and SDH Network, sponsoring a lot of our different things, recognized by magazines here in the region as one of the top firms when it comes to anything, when it comes to successful trial lawyers. Knowledgeable, compassionate, successful trial lawyers, 32 years of experience, over $40 million in verdicts and settlements, serving clients in Georgia and Alabama. Their goal is to provide the best legal representation for their clients and families. So AA-legal.com and you can request a free consultation for Apolinsky and Associates, trial lawyers who deal in personal injury, premises liability, nursing home abuse, and neglect. And you can also reach out to them at 404-377-9191 or Steve at aa-legal.com. Stephen Apolinsky, the founder of Apolinsky and Associates, proud supporter of everything here at SDH Networks. I guess I should have run a clock on that promo.
No, that was good. Also, thanks to our friend Jason Wright. The Jason Wright Agency supported soccer down here for many, many years, runs our fantasy league, which will be back when MLS is back. The Soccer Down Here Fantasy League will be back. So make sure you are following Jason Wright Agency on Facebook, Jason Wright AGEN on Twitter for all of your personal and business insurance needs. Let's get to the Twitter timeline. Hashtag Throwback Thursday. What have people said is their favorite match they've seen live, John?
All right. So Nathan Pugh, who did not come up to us and say, up the Reds, that is all, with this particular idea. He says, the match was a boring preseason friendly, but it was the first time I had seen the Reds in the flesh. July 2012, Liverpool and Tottenham in Baltimore. Went to the Orioles game right after, too. And he says, but seriously, it has to be the hashtag 2017 free burrito match. Vote. Hashtag 2017 free burrito match.
That was a wild one, that's for sure. That's one that I'll definitely remember. I don't know if I'd say it was one of the best, because what I remember about that match is the 11 came out for New England, and I was apoplectic.
You were. I remember that.
Yeah, because I'm like, what are they doing? Like, none of this makes any sense. Like, it's not what they've been doing. It doesn't fit. Like, I don't know what this is going to look like. It makes no sense. And, well, it didn't, because they got beat 7-0. So it was kind of correct. A couple weird things in that one, too. I mean, 2 VAR situations early on in VAR, and both were right. Both were handballs. Just an absolutely weird game across the board, and it was Jay Heap's next to last game with New England. They, after the 2014 MLS Cup, they really couldn't get back to that level, and team needed a refresh, and that was something that, was probably outside of Heap's control. But yeah, it all came crashing down that night at Mercedes-Benz.
Katie Weaver in this morning. She has 2. 2018 MLS Cup's the obvious answer, but it was pure joy. 2. The 1996 hashtag USWNT gold medal win in Athens, historic and a long way from the last time I'd seen them play at Adams Stadium in the early 90s.
They didn't play at Adams Stadium. Well, in the early 90s, maybe they did. I'd have to go back. I don't think they did. They played at Decatur High School in the mid-90s.
Oh, wow. That's right.
Because I saw that. I cannot remember who they played. I'll have to go back and look. But I saw that one at Decatur High. And I know they played after that, I think, in the late 90s, maybe in the lead-up to the World Cup in 99. They played at DeKalb Memorial. I think they played Japan at DeKalb Memorial. But if they played at Adams, I didn't know that. I know they played at Decatur High School a couple of times.
And I'm trying to remember where it was that I interviewed Mia Hamm, what high school they practiced at. And I caught up with Mia Hamm and Julie Foudy before all of that stuff. So, oh, wow. Yeah, so that's definitely definitely the Throwback Thursday for that one. Michael Head is in this morning. He has 3.
Okay.
2018 MLS Cup, obviously.
Yep.
He says, then number 2, it gets murky after number 1. He'll say, at Portland in 2019, what a game at a fantastic stadium.
Yes, that was one of my underrated games of 2019. I thought Atlanta was so good in it, and it's a great stadium. Yeah, I love the venue with the way they did that one side now. It's not exactly like the Bombonera because it's not straight up, but after the lower section, probably the 100 section over there, it is kind of straight up, and it has a little bit of that Bombonera feel from Boca Juniors. That's kind of cool.
And then his 3rd one was at LAFC in 2019. Could have won that one. Great atmosphere and stadium.
The atmosphere was amazing. LAFC fans, with the exception of throwing beers at Nick Raimondo and a couple other times throwing things on the field and incidents with LA Galaxy fans. The LAFC environment is amazing, and that was that. And honestly, and Seattle and Portland fans can get mad. That's okay. The LAFC game and the 2018 Orlando games, when Orlando fans were less miserable about how bad their team had been and still really engaged and riled up, somewhat toxic and lots of colorful language, but atmosphere. Those two, LAFC and Orlando, when they're good and their fan base is engaged, best environments in the league outside of Atlanta, because you feel something.
Yes.
LAFC, like, it's just a great atmosphere for a game, period. Orlando, like, yeah, you feel the antagonistic vibe,
the visceral nature of the hatred.
Love it. That's what the game's all about, is that feeling. Like, I didn't feel that in Seattle when we were there. I didn't feel that in Portland, and part of the reason I think we didn't feel that in Portland was Atlanta dominated that game and completely took them out of it. You feel that at Red Bull Arena, even with a less than capacity crowd. You feel that because part of it is the venue, the roof keeps the sound in. It just feels intense. That's another one that's on the list. Yankee Stadium had a little bit of that feel in 2018 when we were up there. So that's a big part of it. And LAFC, outside of the visceral anger that you get out of Atlanta and Orlando, and specifically from Orlando fans, LAFC is a great environment. Highly recommended.
Nick says, Argentina, Nigeria, 1996. People in dashikis in the front row wailing on drums. Argentina fans going insane. That stadium went nuclear.
That's pretty cool. I wish I'd been able to go to those. I did not. I went to Olympic soccer in Birmingham and random first-round games. Nothing really stood out. So, yeah, that would have been amazing. For me, my big throwback one would be, even though it wasn't the final series, it would be the semifinal series against Montreal for the Ruckus in '95. And part of it's just because of the whole experience for me, because that was in September of '95, and I graduated high school, at the beginning of that summer, and started at UGA, and this was back when we were on the quarter system, and the calendar was a little different. So I was moving in to my dorm in Athens at that time, and I think I moved in maybe the day before, or maybe even that. I think it was the day before. So got everything moved in and drove from Athens to North Druid Hills to Adams Stadium for that game. It was like a Wednesday or a Thursday. I don't remember. It was a midweek. I want to say it was Wednesday. And drove to the game, and it was the first playoff game the Ruckus had. It was game one of the best of three. You had shootouts to determine, a draw. So it wasn't aggregate. It just went to, you had to have a winner, and it was a best of three series. Montreal was the best team in the league that year, and Atlanta barely snuck into the playoffs. And it was a back-and-forth game. It finished tied, went to a shootout, and Atlanta won the shootout. But the reason it sticks into my mind is John Doyle, who played in the 1990 World Cup, was back in the national team by this point, went on to play for the San Jose Clash. He was the just star defender for this team, and it was either in the last regular season game or maybe even the game before that. He broke his nose. And you didn't have guys playing in masks at this point. They just kind of kept playing. So I never saw him wear a mask on the field. He just kept playing. And it was okay until somewhat late in this Montreal game where he got hit in the face again, and he's got every fluid you can think of coming out of his nose. There was blood. There was yellow stuff. There was everything. It was hideous. And, I mean, he comes running over to the bench, and it's Adams Stadium. I mean, you can see everything because it's right in front of you. And it's just like, oh, my God. And I went to this game by myself. because my high school friends that we went to games all summer, we'd all kind of spread off to our colleges, and everybody was starting college. I was the crazy one to drive back for this. So I'm just sitting there like, oh my God, he's not going to be able to continue. We're screwed. This is not going to end well. And he, you see guys like stuff a little bit of tissue up their nose when they have a nosebleed. I don't know how he stuffed all of the tissue in his nose that he did, but he went out, finished the game, had a big defensive play late in it, and then you go to the shootout. Who has the converting shootout attempt to win the game for the Atlanta Ruckus? It's John Doyle.
Oh.
So that is what sticks with me even more than the first game of the final series a few weeks later that was basically the same storyline. It was a back and forth. The Ruckus scored first, gave up the equalizer, and then went to a shootout, and it was John Doyle converting the winner in the shootout again. I think his nose had healed a little bit more by this point, because I don't remember snot and blood and everything flying everywhere. So, yeah.
Ew.
Yep. That's my real throwback game is 95 A-League semifinal game 1 Ruckus and Montreal Impact.
Katie says it might have been the Decatur High School game. She remembers them giving out U.S. soccer dog tags as the giveaway gift walking into the stadium.
Oh, that's cool. I know they played at Decatur a couple of times. They might have played at Adams.
Katie, do you still have the dog tags? That's
very
the question.
Important question. Very important.
All right, and mine, because we do have some folks who've...
I believe John is fighting technology again.
Folks have been circulating on Twitter these days.
Okay.
Where you name like X number of teams and which one have you not seen, and like you name 6, one's a lie, and you try to figure out the lie.
Yeah, I tried that.
So I tried it too, but mine goes back to 1980. And it was NASL version 1.0, Anaheim Stadium for the California Surf and the Washington Diplomats.
Okay, why is it an important game for you? Like, who played?
Well, Bill Irwin was in net for the Dips, and I saw him later in the year here in Atlanta when the Chiefs played the Dips at Fulton County Stadium, sat in the outfield seats and in left field for baseball.
Okay.
But for me, that one is important because it was the first soccer match that I went to with my dad.
Okay. What do you remember about it?
I remember sitting under the overhang at Anaheim Stadium, basically the field level seats down. They did it like they remember Atlanta United 2 up at Coolray, where they went from the foul line up the left field foul line. Yeah. So that was how they laid it out at Anaheim. And we sat in the third base seats, about 20 rows up, and all the action happened, in front of you, like the tennis match, back and forth. Ended up as a draw, but what I remember was being there with my father. I remember getting the rubber soccer ball with the plastic stamped-on logo that peeled off if you were...
Oh, yeah.
And you sit there and you go after it for about 5 or 6 seconds and the logo peels off. And also they were giving out rally towels that evening. And somewhere in my stacks, I have that rally towel from the California Surf for that night. But the reason it stuck with me is it was the first match I got to see with my dad.
Very cool. Okay, we've got a little bit of this. Atlanta United issued a press release that they are announcing their United We Conquer initiative. It's a platform for the club to give back to the community, acknowledge and support those on the front lines of the COVID-19 crisis, and offer resources for fans and community members who would like to learn about safe volunteering opportunities. Included in the initiative, $85,000 to Soccer in the Streets, longtime partner of the Atlanta United Foundation. That's going to assist with operational and coaching expenses during this time. That's big because from a nonprofit perspective, and I don't know budgeting for Soccer in the Streets these days, but I know that one thing that was coming up that would be a very big part of their budget would have been the ATL Champions League event. And that's not going to be held when it was. And you would have already started to see revenue in the way of donations of players participating in it coming into the organization right now. So that's, you start talking about revenue streams, and that's a big one that is not there at the moment. So a grant like this is critical for an organization like a Soccer in the Streets that doesn't have that revenue coming in right now from a fundraising initiative and has to keep staff and keep things going. So that's a very important part. The community resources page is also launched, atlutd.com/community partners. So that is going to have all the info on how Atlanta United is collaborating with organizations around the Atlanta area, offering a variety of resources, access to food, childcare, financial relief, local ride share, fitness opportunities, restaurants offering takeout or delivery. Also, volunteer opportunities that are safe and compliant with all, proper ways to do this and stay safe during this time. Darren Eales said, a core value of our club is giving back to others, whether it's through grant giving to a valued partner like Soccer in the Streets, or providing a central place where our community can go to learn about contributing during these challenging times. There are many ways to give back, either virtually or through safe volunteering opportunities. We hope the community resources page will help to encourage our fans to engage and support in a way that works best for them. So big stuff. It's part of the MLS league-wide initiative, MLS Unites, but Atlanta's United We Conquer initiative has been launched today.
Very, very cool stuff. We have some other things on the timeline for Throwback Thursday.
All right, let's get to it.
Cuppers is in this morning, and he decided to follow up from the U.S. men's national team official account. And the U.S. Soccer men's national team account wanted to know who your U.S. M&T GOAT was. Cuppers said Landon Donovan and Deuce and wanted to know who you got.
It's those two, and I would lean to Donovan because he was a little more consistent over time and contributed in maybe a few more different ways. So I will lean to Donovan, but if you went Dempsey, I'm not going to fight you about it. I think both are right there at the top. Outside of those two, I think you're talking about people like... I want to get to GOAT status out if you took those two out of it. We'll go Mount Rushmore with it since you're going 4, since that's one of the big things these days. Those two are on it. Man, you want to have a goalkeeper on it because of the history of U.S. goalkeepers. Tim Howard, I'm not going to argue with you. You could make an argument for Tony Meola. You could make an argument for Brad Friedel. You could make an argument for Casey Keller as well. Friedel would have been that guy if he had not stepped away from the national team at a fairly young age, and he focused on his club career. And one of the reasons he's still in that conversation is because his club career is as good as anybody who's ever worn the U.S. national team shirt. Friedel's club career in Europe was amazing. So was Tim Howard's, but it was at 2 clubs. And Everton is not, as big of a club. Sorry, Everton fans, but, it's a little bit different conversation. I would probably lean to Howard. You want to recognize a little bit more of the history because I think it's important, and I could honestly go with any of the 3 between Meola, Friedel, and Howard. I think Keller's just a slight step behind those 3. You could make arguments about Eric Winalda, about John Harkes, about Tab Ramos, about Carlos Bocanegra, I think, should be in that conversation. Steve Cherundolo could be in that conversation.
Amen.
If you're going to a 4, like 4 of them, it would be Donovan, it would be Dempsey, it would be, for me, I cannot decide on the goalkeeper. I'm going to go with Friedel.
Okay, because I would go with Howard.
And my last spot as a player, I'm trying to draw it out so I can decide because I don't know.
Ronaldo?
I'm gonna go with. Man, this is hard. I'm gonna go with Tab Ramos.
Okay. All right. I will. I will not argue. I understand the points of view, but I'll go with Howard as my keeper in the number 3 slot.
Well, you didn't give your number 4, so
No, I agreed with your 4. I'm just saying that I would have swapped the keeper.
Okay. All right. Next,
Chris Hutchison this morning, who is out and about, yet he is properly covered and used the hashtag flatten the curve in front of a sign at posted by the Dunwoody Police Department that says everything will be okay. And Chris Hutchison cuts the promo for us this morning. Add some variety and quality into your social distancing efforts by listening to the show.
yay!
Let's see. Then I don't know what song this is attached to, but it has to do with Ronaldinho and his release from jail. And Chris Hutchison says, he's in the hotel now. He's in the hotel now. I told him once or twice to get a real passport and start playing nice. He's in the hotel now. Signed El Messi.
I don't know what song that is. I'm bad with lyrics like that out of context. So I do not know what the reference is, but it's funny.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the 3252 going back and forth and singing the song, but I couldn't come up with what song it was attached to.
Okay.
Tafka has a random question this morning.
I like random questions.
Did we ever sign Patrick Nielsen to a first team or to Atlanta United 2? And for that matter, there seem to be a lot of names on the Atlanta United 2 roster that I don't recognize at all. Am I way behind?
You're way behind. There were a lot of players signed to Atlanta United 2, and I think Patrick Nielsen was likely going to end up there, but obviously that has all been put on hold. So that was, I think, where it was trending. I mean, he was spending more of his time training with the twos towards the end, so the end of preseason. So I think that's where he will likely end up, but he had not signed a contract before the stoppage of play.
Public service announcement, Atlanta United 2 at 2 o'clock on Twitter will have Ben Lundgaard answering questions.
Yeah,
so
submit your questions.
Submit your questions to Atlanta United 2 at ATLUTD2, and Ben Lundgaard will be answering them starting at 2 o'clock this afternoon. So that's your public service announcement for the day. And I wanted to get your opinion. Did you see about IFAB and the handball rule?
Oh, yeah. We got lots of IFAB stuff to talk about. All right. We're going to finish with this.
Go for it.
It's bonkers.
Yes.
Because it's rules, and everybody gets riled up about it. So IFAB made their announcement yesterday about the changes to the laws of the game for 2020/21, and it is actually a possibility if leagues want to do it, that when they come back to play, they could go ahead and incorporate these. That possibility has been floated out, which would just add to the chaos. So, have fun. The VAR side, let's start with that. Dale Johnson of ESPN, at Dale Johnson ESPN on Twitter, has a great breakdown of this. The VAR protocol in the new laws of the game removes the word often in relation to an on-field review, talking about the pitch side monitors. That takes the ambiguity out of it. So let me read it as it was. For subjective decisions, example, the intensity of a foul challenge, interference at offside, handball considerations, and on-field review is often appropriate. Take often out. Now it is for subjective decisions, etc., 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 and on-field review is appropriate. We will see if the Premier League decides to change the way that they are structured with on-field reviews because of that change. They should. We'll find out if they do. Also, they say that recent communication from these competition organizers signaled a positive shift towards the universal application of the protocol from next season. So maybe IFAB went in and smacked people around and backhanded some folks and said, you were going to do this like everybody else is doing, right? Well, I don't know. Right?
I don't know.
Maybe. Okay, now they're on board. So, All right, next. Now, this is, according to Dale Johnson, a major negative. IFAB has rejected providing access to the conversation between match officials during a VAR review. So we're not going to hear what the ref and the VAR are talking about. Well, no, I'm okay with that. I don't need to hear it live.
Yeah, I don't need XFL kind of hearing it live and hopping in. I would just like an explanation.
Yeah, no, but that's what you're talking about is a completely different conversation. That's not what this is. This is playing the conversation during the review. I don't need that.
No.
I want the refs to feel like they can discuss it without that being live. Now, can broadcasters have access to it to air after the fact, like in a halftime or a post-game situation? I would like that. And you're going to have an understanding with broadcasters about how much to air, editing, language as needed, those types of things, because you're not trying to make referees look bad by using this. You're trying to explain it. I think that's very important. But after the fact, and not even in the game broadcast, in a halftime or a post-game situation, that's when it should be available. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I would like to know the rationale and the thought process, but I don't need as much as I will admit it was cool to see when XFL 2020 dipped into the booth and the conversation between the replay official in the booth upstairs and the ref downstairs to get everything squared away and what the wording was. Just give it to me. Let me have it at halftime or post game, so that way we can break it down that way instead of sitting there saying, well, if he thought X, then Y. I would rather deal in absolutes in a situation like that.
Yeah, I don't need it live. I want the referees to feel like they can discuss it without worrying about what they're saying. Clean that up in the post. Okay, handball. For the first time in the laws of the game, ever, the arm is defined for a handball. In the past, referees were taught, and most of them called it this way, that it was the whole arm, from the shoulder down. Anything on your arm is a handball. But now it has changed, and the line from the laws of the game is, for the purposes of determining handball offenses, the arm stops at the bottom of the armpit. So, I mean, that still sets some confusing situations, but generally you are given your sleeve. Let's put it that way for just a way to understand it a little bit. If you're wearing a short sleeve shirt, that's a normal short sleeve shirt, you've pretty much got your shirt as not being a handball. Anything beyond the short sleeve shirt is a handball. The way it's defined is the armpit, but that's roughly what it would look like. So in Johnson's thread, he points out the Tyrone Mings handball that was the top of the arm. So it was down from the shoulder, but it was, up against the shirt sleeve. And that would be okay next season. Most referees would call it a handball now because it wasn't clarified. Now, attacking handball, clarified, not really changed, but it's changed to say that the accidental handball by an attacking player should only be penalized if it, and it's quoted out, immediately results in a goal or an obvious opportunity for the player and or their team to score a goal. Example, following the handball, the ball travels only a short distance and or there are very few passes. So it's not a concrete definition, but it's a little more clear that it's not an accidental handball that happens at midfield that leads to a ball that ends up down the line that is crossed in and a goal scored. That's different. So it gives you a little more clarity. Goalkeeper movement. So, and they cleaned this up, which I think they needed to do, and they got it right. Moving off the line before a penalty. Before the kick is taken, it's only usually punishable if the goalkeeper makes the save. So we've talked about this before. If the penalty is taken and the guy puts it into the stands, or the woman puts it into the stands, because I think a lot of this came up with the Women's World Cup, the goalkeeper comes off their line. You're not going to punish them for that because they put the ball in the stands. But the clarification is, and I want to make sure I get this correct. I thought there was something that gave a little more clarity. Okay. Okay. If the ball misses the goal or rebounds from the crossbar or goalpost, so even if they hit the post, the kick is only retaken if the goalkeeper's offense clearly impacted on the kicker. So you would have to see something about the kicker changing their approach because the goalkeeper came off their line. I'm okay with that. That's fine in terms of the way it's written. They got rid of the stupid automatic yellow card.
Yay!
If the ball does not enter the goal, the kick is retaken. They crossed out the keeper is cautioned if responsible for the offense. You get a warning, and then it's a warning for the first offense, caution for any subsequent. Okay, can work with that. They got that right. Let's see. Some minor stuff. I guess this happened once. I missed it. The little tricky element where a goalkeeper will flick the ball up at a goal kick or a free kick, and it's headed or chested back by a teammate for the goalkeeper to catch. So it's basically getting around, like, putting the ball in the goalkeeper's hands as opposed to a goal kick or a free kick on the ground. If that happens, the kick's just retaken. It's like the old goal kick that didn't come out of the 18. You're not given a card automatically, but you're saying, yeah, you can't do that. Do it again. If they continually do it, then you give the card. Some other minor ones, but Johnson pointed this one out. Restart position is now defined in law as the part of the body touching the ground, which is usually the feet. As such, it suggests that players stood on the edge of the box leaning in on a penalty are no longer encroaching. That gets you, if you want to start down a line of defining positioning and things, that gets you into a point where if you wanted to be a lawyer and argue it, which a lot of referees are,
barristers.
Well, fake barristers a lot of times, but that's the way they look at it. If you want to start arguing this, okay, well, we're going to define restart position in this way on a restart. What about position on an offside decision? Da-da-da-da-da. It opens that door. It doesn't go there yet, but it opens that possibility down the road. I thought that was interesting. I think they also, in just their explanations, did talk about how offside is going to be looked at now. The offside law is going to be examined more closely now in the post-VAR world. So they haven't made any changes yet, but they have said they're going to start looking at it. So I'm good with these. I don't have any major issues with what they did.
Nope. Chris Hutchison says it came from Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? He's in the jailhouse now.
Yes, good call. Man, completely forgot.
And I think Gustavo wins Throwback Thursday.
Well, he's got some different possibilities than we do, and he came up with a good one.
Yeah. Sadly, it wasn't with Atlanta United. As expected, it was with hashtag Toto Rojo and Copa Libertadores. But I remember the first time in another country with the national team, the Copa America 91 in Chile, 3-2 against Brazil, or Toto Rojo 1, Argentinos 2 in 1980. The first time I saw Maradona score live.
That's pretty cool. I never had the chance to see Maradona live. I've had the chance to be in one stadium that Maradona played in, ever. Because in the U.S., unless I'm missing one, he played at Giant Stadium with Barcelona and I think with Argentina in games against Cosmos. He played... Napoli never played in the U.S. when he was there. He might have played in the U.S. with Boca on one of their tours because they were toured everywhere to try to come up with the money to pay him and keep him in the country. But I have to go back and look at that. I want to say he might have played the Cosmos as well. In the World Cup, the only place he played in '94 was at Foxborough, the old Foxborough. So Gillette is not the same venue. Only place I've been that he played was at the Azteca. And that was one of the coolest things was the day before the game getting to be on the field. And for me, like the first place I went to when I got to walk out on the field and walk around was trying to get to the spot, the look that he had at the goal when he scored the great goal. So that was what I wanted to get to first. That was the first thing I thought of getting down on the field. So wasn't a game, but that was definitely maybe it's because it was one of the last soccer memories I have on a field, but that was one of the best because it was the first place that I watched a game from, wasn't there, but watched it live and kind of fell in love with it, was that tournament and that goal being such a momentous thing for the player that inspired me in the game to be in that spot was pretty cool.
How much time do we have left in voting for the watch-along for tonight?
Let's see how much we do, because it was a pretty even vote last time I checked it. Let me find it. Give me a second. Because we are doing a watch-along 7 o'clock tonight, and I've tried to pick some different kinds of games. So right now it is the 2002 World Cup match, Mexico, United States. Close is Madrid and Barcelona from 2009, which was a wild game. That one's still close. 3 hours left on the vote. So that'll be from 7 to 9 tonight. Mike Conti's going to hang out with us. We'll see who else from the SDH All-Stars ends up hanging out with us as well. And at 2 o'clock today, facebook.com/929thegame, Mike and I will have stoppage time for you, and we'll get caught up on all the latest Atlanta United stuff, MLS stuff, whatever else is on your mind.
Minnesota United just came out with a release that they are hosting a blood drive at Allianz Field, so cool stuff from the Loons announced this morning.
Very cool. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about all this, but rest of the day, you got stoppage time at 2. You've got a watch along at 7 o'clock. That'll be at twitch.tv/soccerdown here, and we'll be tweeting all that out as we go. Thanks for all the responses on Twitter. Thanks for listening. Thanks for spreading the word, and we'll be back with y'all later. Mucho plata, y'all.
Mucho plata.